Hey guys, it's Dee Wiley with the Hard Headed Way podcast. Today's episode is called Man Up, Changing the Narrative of the Black Man. And today I went into the family for this conversation to my cousin Don Clark. Now, let me preface this. He is technically Corey's cousin, but because he has hazel eyes, he kind of gets placed over on my bloodline side. So, for all rights and purposes today, my cousin, not in-law, Don Clark is joining me today. Thank you, Don, for joining me.
Thank you, Sean, for having me.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to have Don on. Don is retired military. I think you were in the military for 21 years before you
Mhm.
retired. And since then, and especially since he and I met, me, him, and his wife, and Corey, Don has been heavy into community work. And so I thought there was nobody better to have this conversation with, especially in light of what's happened with Tyre Nichols. And so the premise of the show, before we get started, Don, is some people lead with their logic,
Mhm.
head, or some people lead with their emotion, the heart. Which one are you?
Yeah, I try to keep a good balance. So it's gonna be that kind of interview. I'm not gonna.
Because we know those wildies.
Yeah, but look, I like to keep the options open.
We always have spirited debates, and so we will see what happens as a result of this conversation today. So, okay, I'll take that. He's 50-50. At least that's how he's claiming to start with. And so Don, before we jump in, is there anything else that we need to share with the good people about you before we go any further?
I think you let them know that I'm awesome and that I'm the brighter side of the family. So yeah, let's go ahead and crack it up.
So the next family gathering, there will definitely be a problem.
Always.
All right. So I need to give you a little background because I have been sitting on, I was going to do an individual episode about a week or two ago based off of something that happened with Peyton and his basketball team a few weeks ago when they went to visit a school. And so I held off on it because I thought I would just pull it into this conversation with you, especially in light of what happened with Tyre Nichols. So I want to start off by saying, I know that you're a big advocate in the community. You are always pushing to be part of, I know the voting thing was a big thing for you. And again, you and Tasha are very visible in lots of politics and stuff. And so what I want to ask you is, as a Black man,
Mhm.
how do you change the brand that's already been put on your back? I'm jumping in deep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and I think number one, you know, acknowledge that there's perceptions, acknowledge that there's, labels that society tries to place upon you, but don't really kind of give credence or power to it. If you're gonna walk into anything, walk into it knowing firmly who you are, what you stand for, and what you represent, and let that kind of be your calling card, as opposed to really kind of allowing the perceptions or the you know stereotypical issues that others carry. Don't let them dictate who you are.
That's good. And so I guess my follow-up to that then is, what is it that we need to change in what we pour into our young men? Because I think for me, and so full disclosure, so a few weeks ago, Peyton's basketball team, they played a school that was majority white. I'm thinking majority white. I wasn't there. He came
Mm.
home, came straight in the house, and he was like, Mom, we had to walk off the floor tonight. I said, what happened? He was like, they were calling us the N word. They were making monkey noises. And listen, I,
Oh wow.
I was in my feelings about that. And so for me, the first thing I had to step back and think about, and me and Corey had to talk about this, is what do we pour? What do we pour into him at this point to make that just be a moment, to make that just be a learning lesson, but it doesn't affect who he knows that he is based off of what we've told him up to this point. So what do we pour into our Black men that these kind of instances, what's happening with the police, all the things, don't take away from their esteem?
Yeah. And number one, my heart kind of goes out to my little cousin and anyone. Um, I mean, it's 2023 and we're still dealing with those types of things. But um, that question that you just posed kind of goes to those kids. What's being poured into them?
Oh, yes.
What's being poured into them? What are they being exposed to? And how do you prepare your loved ones
Mm.
for a world that still, makes this distinct separation between one another based upon race, class, religion, or otherwise? Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just being intentional with it all. Um, Peyton being a young black boy growing up in today's world, and all of the visuals,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to really escape the fact that it's so many visuals out there that really remind us all
Yeah.
of the negative aspects that come with, someone looking at you, judging you, or providing some type of provocative separation
Yeah.
based on your color.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And Don, and I'll add this in for additional commentary because I think this was the part that kind of cut me a little bit and why I wanted to save it for my conversation with you because Corey and I are still talking about it. Like it still
Yeah.
rings true because number one, it is 2023, and even though I make him watch the news and he's fully aware, I still didn't have the language, I guess, to, how do you prepare your kid? Like you're preparing for everything, right? You preparing them
Yeah.
for prom. And I expect to have a conversation about sex and first kiss and first love, not being called the N word or being monkey noises being made at you. And so
Yeah.
what hurt me even more so was that so I asked him and Corey, the first two things I asked them about that situation was, what did you notice after it happened? So Peyton knew the coach of the other team because that was his AAU coach. He immediately said, I looked over at the coach and he said, and mama, he wasn't participating in it. I asked Corey, what did he notice? He said there were two biracial girls on the opposing team. He said, I had to wonder, do they realize they're talking about them too? And he said, do they realize that you're part of this community? Where are the parents on that side of the street that's experiencing it? And then the final part was his coach cried when they got into the locker room. So there's how the kids experienced it from their 13, 14-year-old view. And then there's the coach who is adult, who's our age, who is like, like, oh my God, like this just because he couldn't fight back. He couldn't say anything. The best he could do was say, let's go. We're not going to take this and we're going to walk away. And the thing is, Don, the other team was winning. So why was it a need to do that? And so for that, I want to talk about not just changing the narrative, but how do we keep the conversation going? And that, I mean, starting at home with our families, like you guys have a large family. The Wiley clan is a huge family. How do we bring that conversation forward and just have some candid push to be better, to do better?
Yeah, and I think you really kind of framed it up to where it needs to be. You have to have the conversation. You can't afford to not have the conversation. And the thing about it is everyone's individual experiences help feed the collective. Because the experiences that you have gone through as a professional Black woman in the in the market, in the corporate arena, as opposed to what I've experienced either in the military or even in the corporate side. But at the end of the day, each of those really kind of adds more shaping and depth to be able to relate to our young generation. The other part about it is don't lose sight of some of the powerful opportunities and lessons that are available to us all. Little Rock specifically, when we were there for Christmas, I intentionally took my kids, my nieces and nephews to Central Little Rock High. And the sad part about it for me and the disappointing part about it was a lot of them had never even heard about it.
Wow.
Yeah. They had never even heard about it. There was one of them out of 9 of them that I took that had even heard about it.
Oh, wow.
So, so we have to realize that, you know, we've kind of felt very complacent in allowing others to do what we should be doing. Like we're expecting that the schools are supposed to teach history and that history is supposed to reflect, you know, the holistic aspect of thing as opposed to just bits and pieces and all that kind of stuff. But it was a powerful moment to take them out there for them to realize and walk up those steps, and to the top of those steps, I told them to turn around and imagine that whole area filled with people spewing some of those same kind of, you know, insults that Peyton probably heard a very minimal aspect of it.
Right.
But just imagine being very young and having to endure that and having to carry the load of an entire race of people and community, being the trailblazer to kind of open up the schools. So, you know, and a couple of them got kind of emotional just thinking about it.
Wow.
But what I'm saying to your question is we have to do that.
Yeah.
And we have to own that. And we have to be willing to say, hey, there is no too young, too late, too early, you know, kind of moment. We have to continuously groom our own kids to, you know, kind of prepare them for what's to come.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so I call this episode Man Up. And so I want to step back for a second and say, when you hear that phrase, man up, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think now at this age, it means a lot different, because it also means kind of a hurtful place that we've kind of, you know, placed perceptions and stereotypes upon our young boys. You know, I remember being told, stop crying like a little girl. I remember being told, hey, boys don't cry, boys don't this, and boys don't that. And it kind of creates this internalized kind of hardening to where emotionally you're always trying to work on establishing an understanding of, am I supposed to react this way off of this, or am I supposed to just suppress it and just, like you said, man up? And as a Black man, you always have to be even more hypersensitive to the fact of, I mean, I'm 6'3", 240. So of course, if I'm in a meeting and if I raise my voice or if I stand up, then others will immediately say, oh my God, he's threatening in this moment. But then someone else up here that's not Black does the same thing, and it's like, oh, he's having a bad day. And I've seen, heard those exact narratives. Yeah. So that man up to me, I guess now it means so many different things.
Yeah. And I to hear you say that, so because I again, to your point, Black woman in corporate America in leadership, I have to always be cognizant of my tone. I have to always be cognizant of my facial expressions. And I don't get to react. I actually was told not too long ago that I was sensitive. And I thought that was the most hilarious thing ever, because I'm like, sensitive? I don't get to be sensitive. I don't get to be sensitive. Not in that kind of way. Corey gets to hear all the stuff I have to hold in while I'm at work every day. But all things considered, that's my biggest challenge, especially for other African American or brown skinned girls, is that, you know, we have to shape it up and pour it out a little differently than what we feel it a lot of times. And so to me, the biggest thing that I've always wanted to give to Jonathan, Peyton, or any of the boys, men in our family, I always felt like we don't, as a culture, teach our kids to speak up. That's why we fight. To me, that's why we always relent to fighting a lot of times. And so the challenge though that I see with Black men is that they fall, right? We fall. They may go to jail, you know, something happened, whatever. The getting back up is it was hard to stand up already, but to get back up, how do we support that? Because I think, to me, a large part of what we're dealing with is there's some brokenness, there's some mistakes, some things that occurred. And now as a culture, as a family, even, how do we come back to the center and say, but you can still do it. You know, you can still rise above that. And how do we what's the voice, what's the message that we want to send to them when it's been that situation? They've fallen and they can't get back up.
Well, and you know, what we represent to our children is what we hope that they grow into representing for themselves. So one thing that I've always tried to do growing up is really kind of know me, know my limitations, know my strengths, know, you know, what really kind of defines who I am. For our children, we have to help cultivate that understanding in them. Because now this generation, they're so entitled and they believe if I think it, I can do it. And it's that simple, it's that easy, done deal, boom.
Hands down, that is exactly
Oh my
what they're
God.
saying. Yes.
It's like this instant gratification of everything. You know, mama and daddy got a BMW. Bam, we got a BMW. We in there, we killing it. But one thing we're not doing is kind of bringing the reality of it all. Like, first of all of these materialistic aspects, yeah, it's great, it's wonderful. I know it feels good for you, you know, to have those, but they came with a price.
Yes.
Right? It was a lot that had to go into us being where we are, having access to what we have. And I think it goes back to even us as a society realizing that we wouldn't be able to have these, you know, Sean Wiley's in corporate world or Don Clark in corporate world or in the military and otherwise without realizing that there were others that came before us that paved the way for that.
Yes.
So
we're not passing forward the history lesson.
Exactly.
That's the part that's
exactly.
Yes, that's
And
good.
see, yeah, because everybody has to realize there's an origin story that's tied to each and every one of us. But it doesn't have to be your complete story, but it is a portion of it. So it's no point in separating the two. You have to be able to tie them in and be able to benefit them towards your progressive growth or your success in life, or even your growth and understanding of who you are. Yeah.
That's good. Okay, I got you just gave me another follow-up question I got to come back to.
Okay.
Do you remember your first time you were slighted
because
you were a Black man?
Oh yeah.
Can you tell me what it was?
So I'll tell you one of many. Sure. One was in the military, and I was early in my career. And eventually, when I had gotten to the point of understanding and kind of enjoyment of the military, then I was like all in, and I'm going hard charging. Hey, I'm great at this. I'm great at that. I'm well respected, and so on. But when it came time for promotions and awards, there always, at times, depending on the unit, seemed to be some kind of slighted scale that we were judged upon. And my first experience of it in the military was we had went out for like a 45-day field exercise, you know, and busted my hump. I mean, my team was the best. They were doing this, they were doing that. And
Don competitive too, y'all. Like he looked
very competitive. Ridiculously competitive. And we had put it all out there, and my team was overlooked for another team. And the good majority of my team were, you know, men and women of color. Wow. I had Spanish, I had, you know, Black and otherwise. And they mad as hell because I pushed them very hard this exercise, but it paid off. Well, it should have paid off. Yeah. And they should have received the accolades for that hard work, but they didn't. And they gave it to a lesser team. And when it was explained to me, it was explained to me like this. Even though the Army does a great job of trying to instill in us equality and so on, you're still going to encounter different biases and different things like that. And the leader that I had at that time showed a great deal of bias towards Black soldiers.
Wow.
And it was hurtful because I had pushed my team, I had trained my team, and I had prepared them. But in that moment, they didn't receive what they were due at that moment just because of their skin color. And
Oh
that was a
my
pretty
God.
hurtful, yeah, that was a pretty hurtful moment for me. But it also was a needed moment because it opened my eyes to the fact, number one, don't base whatever award or accolade someone can shower upon you or compliment that they can shower upon you. You need to internally have a greater sense of accomplishment and sense of pride in what you've done, as opposed to someone else showering you with it and you receiving a ribbon or a pat on the back or whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's big. And so that's one of the reasons I often I say that that part, the professional part of my life played a large part in my being a head and not a heart, is because I had to figure out how to channel
Mhm.
those experiences and
Yeah,
then make that be their problem and not mine, right?
exactly.
and
Exactly.
and that's a challenge because I do believe we have to work harder, we have to be a lot more
Mhm.
educated, and but we can't be as vocal, we can't be it's like I got to figure out how to shine my light but dim aspects of it
Oh my God.
depending on
Yeah.
whose room I'm
Yeah.
in, right?
Seriously. Yeah.
And so you got a culture of children in our family that are growing up, to your point, these young entitled kids of ours who, they have been given a voice. And that's the culture of all the kids at this point in time, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
everybody, there's no wrong. They gonna all speak their mind.
Mhm.
But explaining to them this part, and again, it's rocking my world with Peyton because I have I have had a hard time putting the right language. And he's 13, 14. So it goes with the level of maturity that
Mhm.
he has too. And so the biggest thing for me is I want our Black boys and girls to know, you got a calling on your life long before those people did what they did and long after
Mhm.
um
Right.
that time occurs. I guess, but for with you being a part of the community, how does that play a part in those conversations you're having when you find out we're not voting? We don't show up to vote a lot of times. How do
Mhm.
you drive that conversation? Because back when Obama was running, it was the thing to do, right? It was the thing. We were supporting the Black man. I don't even know if people knew what. And somebody asked me, well, would you vote for Obama because he was Black? I was like, well, you would vote for him because he's not, because he's not white. And so you wouldn't vote for him because he's not white. And so I'm like, so that's just where we were at that time. But from a maturity aspect, and you
Mhm.
see what's happening in the lower governments, voting is whipping our butts, Don. What do you
Yeah.
say when you go out there?
Yeah. So, I try to impress upon folks, really just the responsibility of it all. But more importantly, just realizing how important it is just to have your voice heard. But unfortunately, it's met with a lot of dissatisfaction and a lot of just disbelief
Mm,
in it meaning anything.
mm,
I mean, look at what we're looking at right now. I mean, the political scene is just so ridiculous.
yes.
But people lose sight of the fact that, okay, it's a lot going on. It's a lot of rhetoric. It's a lot of bull crap that you just see on a consistent basis. But at the end of the day, these people have and they have a responsibility that is way more than you getting on the street holding a sign saying, I don't like this.
Yeah.
They are actually the men and women that have their hands on shaping your communities, on
Mhm.
shaping your benefits, your access to essential services, and so on. And the more that you just kind of sit idle and not allow your voice to be heard, man, look how many opportunities that may negatively impact you or those that you love. Georgia right now is going through a situation, and I think it's really not just in Georgia, but across the country with this whole thing with Medicaid and all this.
Yeah.
And So a lot of those, that legislation that was put in place, some of them are coming up for expiration or renewals, and it's forcing all of those families that depend on those services to have to go through this recertification process. And if they do not go through that process, then they stand to lose their benefits. And it's going to be so many people impacted by that because either A, they aren't listening, haven't been informed, may have moved, so there's not a new address on file and so on. But now they're going to lose something that is essentially important to their families. So I tell people, you can't afford to not let your voice be heard.
God.
And I hate it that we put so much energy into the presidential cycles and we lose sight of how important our local elections are. The local elections impact you more through your day-to-day, every day than the national ones.
It does. And I mean, and for me, I get to see it, especially with Jonathan being a teacher. He was telling me about some of the bills that are coming through now. And he was like, it's there's some raises tied in there for teachers. He said, but there's also some other pieces in there. And so what you do is you slide in the things that are going to cut people in the midst of the good things. So all you hear about is the good part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And you don't see the other parts of the bill. But you mentioned something about access. And I have to ask this question because it is something that became very big during COVID. And then I heard Charlemagne the God make a comment or post about it the other day. And that's mental health. So, in the Black culture, I will say it's changing. I think it's changing that people are starting to realize they need therapy and things like that or whatever. And so how has that been for you? And I don't know this. Like, I know, Corey and I have done marriage counseling, but also I know he's seen a therapist once he came back from Iraq. And so is that something that you've experienced? Like, what are your thoughts on mental health and getting mental support for Black men?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to that statement that you said earlier, man up, that's one of those things that if you have to go to counseling, if you have to seek help and everything, it's one of those perceptions that, I won't say culturally, but society, throughout society, it's like, oh, you're weak, or, oh, you have an inadequacy that you can't just work it out yourself. Everything you can't just grind out. Everything you can't just say, hey, you know what? Snap out of it, rub some dirt on it or whatever.
Exactly.
There's some things that are, deeply entrenched in each of us that we need some assistance, but also some just clarity on it all,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And not just even clarity. And I think to your point about, I think you said y'all, don't be crying like no girl. And even for me being a girl, it was like dry your face up. Like, you do not like, on my mom's side of the family, that is the rule. You do not let people see you crying at all. Right. And so it's hard to me to just admit that you need help because, strength for us is being able to go in and do it alone. I don't know why we as a culture believe that. Like, I can't figure out where that came from, but why is strong equate to you go and you figure it out and you do it alone? Well, you won't always know the answers.
Yeah, but that kind of goes back to though, Sean, because my dad, I didn't grow up with my dad. So I didn't have an example of what it is to be a man going through the day-to-day struggles of raising your family. I didn't have that. So that meant that I had to fill in those gaps with my own interpretation and my own manifestation of what it is to be a man and going through the world. And one thing that we always kind of tie synonymous to manhood is being strong, being the provider, being the protector, and being those things, those labels themselves. There's not a lot of room in there for weakness or for, hurt or for I need help. It's not a lot of room in there for you to do that. Those are action words that you really have to show, be, and do. And if you don't, then you are kind of perceived or can be perceived as, ooh, what kind of man is he?
Ooh.
You know, and those,
Yes.
yeah, those are things that really kind of beat you down and really kind of push you to a point of bypassing help, bypassing just the simple phrase of, I need help, can you help me? Or
Mm.
I have a problem, will you help me? Um, yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
So,
I saw
okay.
I see your mind. I see your mind. You was like,
So
oh.
I was waiting. You introduced it perfectly because I was going to talk about being raised in a single family
Yeah.
home, obviously led by your mom. And same for me.
Mhm.
I told my oldest son this because I know what I poured into him is probably a
Mhm.
lot different than I have with Peyton. But
Right.
my mom poured surviving into me, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't remember. And to me, when you're a single parent, you give up the ability to probably nurture in a lot of cases because you're raising.
Yeah.
Mom can't be you're gonna lose out on pieces of it, and the nurturing
Mhm.
is a large part of it.
Mhm.
But yet and still, while I didn't have a picture of my dad, because my dad died when I was 2, I still didn't have a pulse for what that having a man around is like because she taught me to do everything on my own. And so
Right.
for you guys, and Corey says this all the time that daddy didn't do that, all the things because my daddy Brody was the man.
Mhm.
All I'm saying. But with that, there's a challenge of number one, growing up. You a man, you're told to man up, whatever that
Mhm.
expectations, and you're the oldest, right? Aren't you the
Mhm.
oldest?
Yeah, I
And
am.
so with that, Don, how did you shape? Was it just bumping your head?
Oh
Was
yeah.
it when you started dating or having children, you got to see what you look like? Like how did you see your view of yourself since your dad wasn't in the house with you to help form that?
So I'm gonna say like the ladies say, "Ooh, child, this would be a whole nother session, right?" This would be a whole nother session within itself.
Wait, hey y'all, Don was supposed to be in town when we did this face to face because I knew this was gonna be some good conversation. So yeah,
Ooh,
but I couldn't hold it in. I was gonna ask you Don
yeah,
regardless.
man. So I'm gonna tell you this first. I'm gonna tell you this first. My mother, and I tell people this even on some of the speaking engagements I do. I learned my strength as a man from a woman. And that was the
Mm.
sacrifice and what I saw my mother go through just to, like you said, survive and provide. And my mother was working a couple jobs at a time, and to give herself that sense of kind of drive and comfort, she just kind of put it in her mind, hey, my kids are going to do the right thing. But while I'm out here trying to provide, they're going to see and know and understand that I'm sacrificing for them.
Right.
And, we all kind of internalize that differently. Me being the oldest, I took it very, very serious because I saw it, I recognized her grinding at such a young age. And so it kind of planted a perception in me. I don't want to be the problem child. I don't want to be the one that gives her more stress and more frustration and more just kind of, to carry. So I would try to just do what I wasn't perfect. I'm not going to even front and say I was perfect in everything, but I tried to minimize that as much as possible. But it also led me to internalize a
Mhm.
lot. So early on, it cultivated in what you were saying earlier, that whole man up, like keep it to yourself. If I couldn't get it for myself, and even though they were essential things that I probably really could have benefited from bringing to my mother and saying, hey, I would do without it.
Mm.
And then, yeah. So I think for me, without having that male figure in the family, in the household, I didn't have a mirror reflection to be able to kind of see why I do different things, or even how I look, or even just the fundamental aspects of just development. I wasn't able to pull those from my father because he wasn't in the picture.
Right.
So I would listen to stories from family, whenever we would come to Arkansas for the summers, or, just Uncle Brody when he would come and visit us. And I would always hear all these stories about my dad. And I would try to take those interpretations
Mm-hmm.
and try to formulate what I thought he was, or apply them to me on how they would fit for me. And so to your point earlier, yeah, it was a lot of bumping my head. It was a lot of mistakes made. It was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of but I think I think it's important and essential.
Yeah.
Because I look at mistakes as an essential part of progression. I tell my kids, imagine a ladder and imagine the two sides of that ladder, but the essential part of it are the steps. And I tell them, each mistake that you make in life, you have to, number one, acknowledge that it was a mistake, learn from it, and reinforce that in your mind to not make that mistake again. When you've done that, you put your first step up towards the next one. But every step that you make in life are essential for you to progress. So those are things I had to really kind of learn growing up, because I was the oldest, and I was not only, trying to keep my mother's, stress level down, but I was also trying to set an example for my siblings.
Right.
That, hey, you can do this, and this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting though when you go through that dynamic.
I think that because that shows up for me and Corey, especially in our marriage or whatever.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things about us wanting to be around other couples. Number one, because y'all, we could tell Don and Tasha about our arguments. You just don't even know. And it's no discomfort there. It's like, yeah, that's just what it is today. We might be eating breakfast and nobody talking at breakfast. You just never know what you might get. But the beauty of it is, and this is big for me, especially with Corey, because he's a heart, is that he understands and also feels that community space, like you're not gonna always get it right. Like you're going to fail. Like it's okay. You're going to fail. And I feel like that has been the great thing again about connecting with you guys, especially at the point that Daddy Brody and all them passed. That was a really big turning point, especially from a male perspective, and just seeing how you guys carried it out. And again, we're getting to be the older generation now, right? Our moms and dads, uncles, aunts, and all that are getting older, and we're having to support them. So we're kind of in that space now where we're having to bring everybody forward and lead in a lot of spaces. So I thought you guys did an amazing job in that space and just supporting each other overall. But so I gotta say this, in the midst of things that have been happening with, Black Lives Matter and what happened with Tyre Nichols and all of that, can I ask you, what was your first reaction when you saw and or heard about the Tyre Nichols thing?
So I was bothered with how they kind of made it into this movie premiere. Like, coming up next, we're going to show the actual video footage. And it really kind of made me sick to my stomach, just from that aspect. Like, okay, you're building up this intrigue. I get it for your ratings and all that. But the basis of it is somebody lost their life where they didn't have to. And it's not an easy place to be in, to where it's like, here we go again. Here's another one. It was more disheartening to see and hear the video, because here's yet another Black man hollering for his mother. Tyreek's was a lot more disappointing. I won't say disappointing, because I think those of us who are honest enough know that there's just as much dysfunction in our own culture than
Absolutely.
than others.
Yeah.
So to see all of these black men, ganging up on Tyreek like that, um, really kind of to me resonated with a lot of the issues that we deal with as a culture.
Come
We have
on.
we got so much self-hate and so much just disdain for one another to where we always say this crabs in a barrel, crabs in a barrel. And you always hear crabs in a barrel, described when we're talking about us. But the one thing about it is crabs aren't made to be in a barrel. So of course they're fighting to get out of it. Just like we aren't made to really go through a lot of the societal barriers and norms that we go through. But the thing about it is, when do we finally get to a point of understanding and healing to where let me help you so that you can help the next one and you can help the next one to eventually all of us collectively working in that regard can help each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was hurtful to see that. It was angry. I was angry. I was angry to watch it. Um, yeah,
I couldn't even watch it. I listened to Ben Crump on the radio that morning, and he said, and when he said what he said, I was like, I'm not going to watch it. He said, you don't even have to hear the audio. He
yeah,
said to watch it without the audio, you will see that there was no humanity. Like, it was really hurtful. And again, one of those things that I'm talking to Peyton and my cousin's daughter that rides with us in the mornings, talk to them about it. But to hear all the details that are surfacing
yeah,
around it and all of that, it's just disheartening. But it begs the bigger question: how do you, as a black man, or Corey as a black man, how do you feel like you can reassure Tasha, your mom, your sister, when you walk out the door,
yeah,
you coming back? Like that is a true legit fear at this
mhm,
point in time.
yeah,
And it's you don't think it's on your front door until it's at your front door, right? And so how do
right.
you what are your what's your thinking around that?
See, so me, I'm different because I try not to walk in the fear of it.
Okay.
I try, I walk in the understanding that it can happen. But I try not to shock and awe myself into, hey, I'm just going here. I'll be right back. Because at the end of the day, I've really kind of come to a serious understanding that all of our lives are predestined.
Mm,
And no matter if I take every single step perfectly, and if I wrap myself in a big bubble, there's still something that was already preordained and predestined, that was going to occur in my life.
yeah.
So I try to make sure I stay prayed up. I try to make sure that I keep my sense of awareness high. Um, I really look at it when I get pulled over for a ticket
Mm, mm,
that automatically, I'm trying to talk myself through it, but more importantly, keep aware of keeping some kind of calm in the
yeah.
situation. So I've long since changed it to where my wallet, I don't keep my wallet in my pocket when I'm driving. I
Mm,
keep it like up front and central or in my visor, even with my ID. I'll
wow.
have my IDs in my visor. Like if Tasha and I are driving long distance, I'll put my ID in the visor with the license and the registration so that I don't have to be reaching, grabbing, and all that. I find myself when a officer comes up to my car, putting my hands up on the steering wheel, or if I'm in the convertible, letting the top down so they can have full view. But doing those kind of things, it's just like, man, I'm just blown away that this is where we are.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just so it's there is, trying to explain to my child why he can't wear his hoodie on his head when he's out in the neighborhood,
Yeah,
right? Like, and it seems so minute, but when you think about Trayvon Martin, it was minute thing. It was a hoodie, right? It was like we literally had a falling out between races about a young Black kid getting killed.
Mhm.
He had on a hoodie. And so for me, I keep trying to like, it's such a big thing that, or it's such a small thing that could unravel into a big thing so fast. And my biggest concern is that, and I have an episode that will air soon. A girlfriend of mine has a special needs son. She said his dad's a police officer. My fear is that he's going to see a police officer. They're going to give him a command and he's not going to respond because
Exactly.
he knows his dad. He sees all police cars and he thinks that's his dad. And she said,
Yeah.
that's my greatest fear, is that they won't recognize that he's special needs. And so it's
Exactly.
that kind of stuff. And I know we'll have to always continue that conversation. And I feel, especially at this point in my life, especially with all the things that are going on, I just feel like it is a great conversation to have. You taking the kids to Central is big, because I will be fully honest, it was not until I visited Central over the last few months that gave me a view of how I'm slighting my kids and not giving them a good history lesson. To hear and walk through that through their eyes, hearing
Yep.
their words, what you see on TV doesn't give it justice. What you've read about in the news, to hear it from their perspective
Yeah.
gives you such a different launching pad into
Yeah.
understanding just how, to your point, the weight that they carried on their shoulders. And so I want to touch on something you said about history. I know y'all, Don and Tasha, are big Ancestry.com. Is that who y'all did y'all's research through? Ancestry.com. They got Corey over here doing it, and he up all night long. Look, he was determined to find stuff out about my side. I was like, mind your business. You stay on your side of the family. Don't come over here trying to cheat on me. He's showing me pictures. Who is this? Do you know who this is? Yeah, I know my people, man. Don't trying to clown me. But and this is the reason, when I first started thinking about having guys on, that was another reason that you kept coming to my head, is because I know that you have really been big into this, encouraging lots of the family to do it. I think since you and Tasha started it, y'all have had these conversations. So many people in the family have done it. But what's your why? Do you think that gives, to your point, like a historical foundation for us to just kind of know where we come from? What's your why? Like, why is that so intriguing to you, and why do you push for everybody to do that?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it's hard to know your why. It's hard to know your who if you don't know where it came from, where it started, with the origins of it. This picture I put behind me on my background is a picture of an iceberg. And icebergs, many people don't realize what we see on the water surface is just the tip of it. In many cases, it goes down for miles and miles and miles. There's so much depth and so much more to it. But the only thing we see is that tip. And I equate that to each of us. There's so much more to each of us. But if we don't take the intentional steps of really kind of deep diving into that, you really don't have a full understanding of who you are, and also even the potential of what you are maybe even not fulfilling in your own life, through those that came before you. So for me, understanding the who's, understanding the challenges, understanding the burdens, and understanding the struggle really kind of also adds more depth to my understanding of who I am, but also adds additional fuel to never ever settle for mediocrity, for never settling for just regular or just surviving or getting by. For me, it's like, okay, I have more to take forward. So if the only thing you see is that tip of me, if that's what you settle for, only wanting to know and explore, then that's what I will continue showing you. But I'm going to continue moving forward with everything that I have in me and everything that I know from my history, and realizing that I stand on the shoulders of freaking giants.
Right. Oh, that's good. I almost want to end there, but I can't. I gotta ask you one more question.
All right.
So You set the stage up perfectly. What is Don DC Clark Jr.'s legacy?
So I think my legacy is, man, that's a good one, Sean, because that's one I've always struggled with,
Yeah.
really, is understanding what my legacy is.
Mm.
I'll be 50 this year, and
Come on, 50. I didn't know that, man.
yeah, look, don't let all this beautifulness, fool you.
I didn't know that. We have to celebrate. I did not
Yeah,
realize that.
yeah, I'll be 50 this year, but it's a lot of times, Sean, that I have these kind of moments of reflection. I still haven't fully achieved my full potential.
Mm.
And it was a long time. It was many, many times in life that I ran away from different things that were absolutely intended for me to do and step into and walk into. um and realizing and just really coming into the understanding of, dude, okay, you can run, you can keep running, but guess what, it'll be here the next cycle of you coming back around until you finally just say, okay, let me settle down and let me
Mm.
walk in.
Man.
And yeah, and I think it's so many of us, man, that just are just running because we don't feel like, exactly. We don't feel like, no, that's too much. I'm not great enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough to be able to do that. And the thing about it, the only thing that separates someone that's very successful and someone who is just kind of like just sitting still is taking that first step.
Mm.
You know, and taking that leap of faith in, I am worthy enough. And even if I'm not, and even if I make mistakes through it, I'm still going through the
Mm.
process. And that's the courageous aspect of it. So for me, from a legacy standpoint, I would want to say my legacy is, that I set a great example and left a great body of work for my family and others, to not just be proud of and celebrate, but also to pick up arms and say, okay, let me follow in that, or let me take that to the next level and continue building upon that. I mean, for me, it's not just about me with anything I do. It's about those that I love, those that are around me, those that I come in contact with, planting those seeds so that that can kind of be cultivated and harvested greater than just Don.
Mm.
Yeah. So for me, that's what my kind of, that's my belief. Because community, if you don't pour into community, if you don't pour into others, then to me, I think you're really, selfish, because each of us has something that we can pour, no matter how small it is, how grand it is, or otherwise. But it's something that someone will take and say, you know what? You gave me this. And in you giving me this, it grew me to do this. And it inspired me and pushed me to do this. And those are those kind of points of satisfaction that we all kind of hopefully embrace. But I know I do.
Mm. Tell Tasha you preached your first sermon.
Uh, oh my God.
John, that was good. Like I don't wanna take away from that because that was all really good. And you stepped on my toes completely. I am just now getting to a place of unselfishness and
Mhm.
trying to look at what is my pour
Yeah.
for those around me, and getting past the imposter syndrome and all the
Yep.
things that
Yep.
has stopped me. And so it is selfish. God gave us these experiences for probably not just for to grow us, but to help others that
Oh
are
yeah.
around us. And so I love to see what you're doing with the community. I do love the conversations that we have around family, and just seeing what the ancestry conversations have yielded. And y'all, it's been some late night family breaking up.
Long night. Like what?
We've learned a lot of stuff at midnight. Him and Corey on the phone. I was like, listen, I don't want any parts of what's happening on that phone tonight. But I appreciate you, cuz like seriously, this was good. I don't want to stop it. I'm determined to have him and Tasha on, and we have a couples remix episode because that will be a very good conversation. But I'm appreciative. We might have a therapist there when we have our conversation.
Yeah, we might have to have a mediator for that one. Lord have mercy.
Appreciative of you, like you have really, it has been since the moment because me and Tasha were new to the family, stepped in. She has been queen mother from the beginning, the big cousin. She gonna tell us what she don't like. She don't want macaroni and cheese, and it better not have any sugar in it, and all the things that she don't like. She's going to let us know. But I'm appreciative of you giving me your time today, and then just the seeds that you dropped, the nuggets that you dropped here, because it's hard to know your why if you don't know your who. Hashtag that's a good one right there. I was like, yeah, Don did good. So thank you so much, cuz I appreciate you. Thank you, and you will be back, right?
I will be back for sure, and I'm proud of you too, Sean. This is something, you had a lot of nervousness and anxiety surrounding around this, and it's helping you come out of your little nerdy shell as well and open up, add some more depth to you, Sean. So I'm super proud.
He preached one sermon just now, and now he a motivational speaker.
So now all of a sudden he Dr. Phil, huh? Yeah.
But thank you so much. I appreciate you, and more to come. Thank you so much, Don. I love you, man.
All right, love you too, cousin.